back. So it is a dry wine. I mean, there's no sugar left in here at all. Notice the weight on your tongue. It's what we call the body of the wine. It kind of glides over the tongue really nicely. Okay, and it hits every part. Don't be afraid. Any new folks here? There we go. Don't be afraid to take it in your mouth and squish it around your mouth. Okay, because every part of your mouth detects something different about the wine. If the wine, for example, has very high acidity, you'll feel a tingly sensation along the sides of your tongue. If the wine, as we mentioned, has any sugar or sweetness to it, you'll taste it right up front. If it has any fruitiness to it, you'll taste it about a third of the way back on your tongue and through the rest of your mouth.
Why don't we taste sugar or fruitiness? What did they do in processing and making the wine that prevented those?
What they do when they make wine is they take the grapes and they crush them or press them and let it ferment. Now, all fermentation is the conversion of sugar into grape juice. We call must. Conversion of the sugar to alcohol. And what does that is the yeast. The yeast eats the sugar, converts it to alcohol. Two other residual benefits or byproducts. One is heat and the other is carbon dioxide. And they just kind of go off into the air. Okay? As we saw the last time we were here when we did Blue Mountain and we did the sparkling wine, in the case of champagnes and sparkling wines, they let it go through a second fermentation, only this time it's in a closed bottle or a closed container where they capture those bubbles. And that's where the bubbles come from in champagne and sparkling wines. What happens is, under normal conditions, there's X amount of sugar, X amount of yeast. The yeast is able to eat all of the sugar. And once there's no more sugar left, the yeast dies. So there's no more sugar left in the wine.
So it doesn't matter how long they leave the yeast in the
That's right. That's part of it. That's part of it. If you want to make a sweet wine, the classic example of doing this is White Zinfandel. And it's easy to talk to because everybody's had it. Everybody knows what it tastes like. I don't know whether anybody knows that White Zinfandel is as black a grape as that. Okay, it's even blacker. So it actually accomplishes two things in our classes. It lets people learn about rosés, because where does the color of a wine come from?
From the skin.
It comes from the skins. Okay. In the case of red Zinfandel, they let the grape stay in contact with the juice stay in contact with the skins for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long the winemaker wants. It keeps extracting color. In the case of white Zinfandel, they let it stay in contact for maybe a day until it turns that pinkish color, or whatever color the winemaker wants. And then he extracts the juice. Okay? And then lets it undergo continue on with the fermentation. If he or she, if the winemaker were to let that go to completion, you'd have a dry white Zinfandel. But because they want to make it sweet, what they do is they stop the fermentation before it's complete. And they can do that one of two ways. Well, actually, a couple of different ways, but the two most prominent ways. Number one is they can chill the wine to a temperature below which the yeast won't live. So the yeast dies, you're left with sugar in the wine. That's why it's sweet. Second way to do that is to add some sulfur dioxide to it, which again kills the yeast and stops the fermentation.
And the third way is they can filter the yeast out.
And they can filter the yeast out. Okay, but you have to do something to it usually. Yes, Kat?
I want to talk about fruitiness. That's why
Okay.
we're doing this.
Okay, now we talk about fruitiness, which is a completely different concept than sweetness. Okay, when we talk about sweet, we talk about sugar. When we talk about fruitiness, we talk about fruit flavor.
So Lou, what fruit character is everybody getting on this before we go on?
Right. And before you finish it, what kind of flavors did you get?
More citrus.
Citrus is one. Anyone get a little pear? A bit of not a super ripe pear, but a little pear. I did. I guess it's how it coated my tongue too. the citrus and the pear,
And on the finish, anybody get a little hint of almond?
as you swallow.
Yeah.
Just a little hint, okay? Very, very typical of Cortez.
So now you're gonna explain where some of this fruitiness comes from.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. As the wine is fermenting in the barrels or the stainless steel, they take oranges and they throw it in. They take pieces of chocolate and they throw it in. And yeah, you know.
Yeah.
No, it comes from a couple of places. The flavors of the wines that you taste will come from, number one, the grape itself. And the grapes, every grape has some indicative set and characteristic set of flavors. But how then can you grow a grape in one area, grow a grape in another area, and have them taste different? The reason for that is because of the soil. The soil imparts a lot of different nuances and complexity to the wines. The harder a grapevine has to go to find water, the more complex flavors it's going to have. Now, what do you think that the best soil for grapes are, fertile or non-fertile?
No, because they keep searching for.
What happens is, if the soil is too fertile, the roots will go down about this far, and they'll spread out horizontally. Because they've got everything they need. They've got all the food they need, they've got all the water they need.
What about with irrigation?
Well, let's talk about that in just a sec. Hang on to the question, please. What you want is the roots to go down meters and meters and meters looking for water. And as it brings all the nutrients back up, it's bringing in flavors all along the way. Okay? So that's where you get a lot of that complexity of flavors. Now, in the case of drought conditions, and irrigation is not allowed in many, many, many places in the world. It just simply is not. There are some exception places that are allowed to irrigate. And they will only do those under the very most drought conditions, where they've got to bring some water to the vines so they won't die. Okay, a really good example of that is, anybody ever been to Washington State?
Been to Seattle.
Been to Seattle? Ever been to the middle of the state?
No.
We flew into Oregon and we did the Willamette Valley vineyards and stuff, and we kind of drove along the Columbia Gorge and drove through the gorge and through the forest and emerged in Washington. And what do you think we saw?
Desert.
A desert. I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, where are all the trees? Brown for as far as you could see, except for little patches of green. And the green was where they were able to irrigate, and they grew grapevines and hops. Hops for making beer. It's the largest producer of hops in the country. But it was the most amazing thing, this great expanse of brown, these little patches of green.
But Lou, they have to be very careful not to over-irrigate so that the vines are still what we call stressed, where they still have to go down and bring back the different layers and so on. And just to summarize, there's at least two ways you get the fruit from the grape. One is it's the natural grape characteristic, and the other is what you're bringing back up through the soil layers.
Right. Did that answer? Okay. What do you think of the wine?
I like it.
Very nice.
Isn't it nice? It's kind of medium bodied. It's got some good flavor to it. It is not encumbered by oak. So I mean, I would enjoy this with any white sauce pastas, with rabbit, with pork, poultry.
Chicken,
Shrimp.
fish.
A shellfish.
It's crisp enough.
Yeah.
You could feel the acidity that I could do it with shellfish.
Yeah.
White fish.
Any seafood, and with a white sauce de risotto. For those who've never been to Piedmont, though, boy, you're missing out on some risotto that'll knock your socks off. They're really, really
Lou,
unbelievable.
everybody's going to get a hint here to how much you love anything Italian.
Oh.
Lou, what does fruit forward mean? It sounds.
Fruit forward, and you won't get that in any of the wines tonight. Normally, it applies to a New World wine,